For my advanced portfolio, I set out to explore how visual effects are used to create a believable level of realism inside the diegesis. So I set out to create a short film where I could really test my experience with visual effects and push myself to see what I could come up with. And this itself proved to be a massive challenge for me, as I would have to take into consideration all aspects of cinematography so I could get these visual effects to look realistic and make the audience believe what they are seeing on the screen. Editing is another micro element that I'll have to focus the most on, as if I get anything wrong with the visual effects, then the audience aren't going to believe what's happening on the screen, and it'll just reduce the quality of my overall film, which isn't what I want to do. I want to set out to make the best that I could possibly make. When I was starting to plan my film, I had to think about the genre, because the genre really determines what visual effects that I can use inside of the film. And with my focal films all being sort of superhero monster films, I had to settle with the science fiction because I wanted to incorporate elements of all three of them films into my film, and the only way to do that was to get the same genre as what they are. So basically, for my film, it's about a man who questions whether reality itself is real or whether reality is just a dream. And the way that I'd get all this to work is by using these visual effects to show that the reality he's living in is a dream world, which is hinted inside the film with the dice, which never stops spinning until the dream comes to an end, which is when it stops spinning and it doesn't follow or stick to the basic laws of physics. I think picking a story like this has made it far easier to think of the visual effects that could go along with it. That's because it's a dream world, and in a dream world anything goes, so I had endless possibilities to do whatever I could think of doing. And so I could take aspects of each of my focal films and put them into this one film, and just look at the style of cinematography, look at the editing techniques, look at the mise-en-scène, and look at the sound, and then transfer them all into my film, so then I can create something which has visual effects at the centre of it all, and really pulling it all together to make it work as a film. The reason why I chose to make it a short film rather than a sequence is because in the short film you get the whole story, whereas if it was just a sequence it would just focus on one part of the film, so it would really limit me to the amount of visual effects that I could cram into that 5-minute clip. Whereas when it's a short film, I get to tell the whole story, which is better because not many questions are going to get asked if they see the whole story, whereas if they just see the little clip, then they're going to get confused about what's going on, and is he dreaming? Why has he got these powers in this world? So putting it all together in one 5-minute film has worked very much to my advantage in this respect. So, how does my film link back to my focal films, as in stylistic features and so on? So what I took from Man of Steel was I took the very first flying shot that you see of Superman, and the reason I took this is because it just looks really good, and it reveals to the audience slowly what's happening, which is what I wanted to accomplish in my film, and it really gives it the feeling that you don't know what's going to happen. So it's sort of like a heroic moment in the film, and it is one of the key scenes in the film, so I wanted to try and recreate that in my film, so it's a key scene in my film as well. So the way that this is done so effectively is with a number of shots which lead up to the flying shot, and one of these is where Superman goes down on one knee and then the camera sort of pans around him, which is what I tried to recreate inside of my film before eventually the main character just blasting off into the sky as you see in the film. And as I mentioned before, this is done to give the film suspense, so you're all waiting for that one moment where he takes off, can he actually do it, and so on. What I decided to take from Oblivion wasn't so much on the visual effects side of things, but was on the storyline side of things, the narrative side, where it's a mystery and the mystery slowly gets unveiled to the audience as the character discovers what's going on, which is what I wanted to do in my film, and I think it works quite well in my film as it explains why he's got the effects, why he's got the powers even throughout the film, and then at the end it sort of just leaves you on a cliffhanger, and it leaves you wondering, questioning yourself when and I suppose the main thing that I got from Cloverfield for my film was the handheld sort of feel to the camera, so it makes the effects seem more realistic and it pulls off quite nicely. And the way I did this was by, when I was editing my effects, I could add a virtual camera into the effects, so then I can give it the impression that it is a handheld camera, although it was on a tripod at a time when I had to edit the effects. I think researching all of these films gave me more of an insight of what I wanted to do with my visual effects, and then how I needed to go about doing them to pull them off effectively, which in turn is what my creative investigation is based upon. I also took some of the visual style from Cloverfield as well, as I just really liked the way it looked and the way it made the audience feel, so I just implied that into my film. What I wanted my film to do to the audience was to have them question the reality around them, and I wanted them to believe the visual effects that are being shown on the screen, so they truly do get immersed into the fictional world that I've created with my film. I wanted them to believe that these visual effects were real and not just things that they're seeing on a screen that really doesn't look too great. So I had to spend a lot of time actually getting these shots that had the visual effects in. I had to get them as near enough perfect as I can, just so people didn't pick up on the noticeable flaws that would take them outside of this diegesis and then would really ruin the meaning of the film. This really helped me to understand how important the visual effects are inside of a sci-fi film or a psychological thriller, because without them you're not going to be able to get anywhere near the desired effect that you need. But if you have them and they're not up to the right standard, the right quality, then it's just really going to take away from the meaning of the film. Like the framing of the shots, the visual effects shots, they have to be right, because if they're not right, then the audience is just going to question why the camera's not looking at it from a different angle, why it's staying in the same angle, and they're just going to lose interest in the film, and the moral of the film just really becomes irrelevant because it's not as powerful as was what it was intended to be. The visual effects have also played a huge part as to how the character is represented to the audience, because without them he is effectively represented as just a young male who is suffering with some sort of depression of some sort. But with these visual effects, it allows the audience to see it in a whole different light. These effects allow me to take that stereotype and bend it and create something new that is more relatable to the audience. I wanted the audience to see themselves in the character. To be able to finish my A2 coursework, I've had to reflect on the work of my previous year for my AS, which involves all aspects of my AS course, which was like the 21st century digital technology and the global cinema. And then I've also gone into depth and looked at Marxist theory in relation to my film. So in my research into the 21st century digital technology, I was able to find out that visual effects have become more practical since the technology has advanced more. So they've become cheaper to make and they've been easier to make, more believable. So the skill set that you need isn't as high as it was, say, 30 or 40 years ago when they were still using blue screens, and to create a 2-second clip it could take anywhere from 2 hours to 2 weeks, as I saw in a Star Wars interview that I looked at in my creative investigation. So these becoming cheaper to make and getting made in a shorter amount of time, this has led to more films, especially blockbusters, relying more on the visual effects side of things to sell their film. And this links nicely into the global cinema, which is another topic that I researched last year. So around the globe, there is a huge interest in visual effects. The majority of the films that you'll see will have some sort of CGI visual effects scenes inside of them. And the main reason that this is done is due to global demand. The audience want to see more of these effects. They want to feel as though they're watching a world which they cannot physically live in, but they just want to feel immersed in that world, so they feel like they're in the world for 2 hours at most. This is mainly down to escapism having a large part to play in this, as they no longer feel like the society they live in is as good as it is made out to be, so they just want to go out and try and forget about everything and just think about a new place where everything's perfect and all the ideologies are the same. So it is just an ideal world, but I didn't want to explore that with my film. I wanted to make the film feel as realistic as it possibly can, and that means including some Marxist theory in there. So inside of my film there is ideology which falls inside of the superstructure that the Marxist theory suggests. This is suggesting that the overruling mysterious force in my film is similar to that of the upper class in real life, who sort of rule our ideology. They only show us what they want to see, so we can't really have a full understanding of what's going on. and that's part of what Marxist theory is, and that's what I want to incorporate into my film, so the audience do feel like they can relate back to the character, as they feel like they are being pinned down by this underlying force and they've got no way of getting out, breaking out of this superstructure, because that's how society works, and without it, there'd just be chaos. So back to the aims and the creative investigation. Have I actually achieved what I set out to do? And that was to create a believable level of realism inside of the diegesis and make the audience feel as though they can connect to the character and just be submersed into this film which I've created for them. In my opinion, I think I have done what I set out to do. I think I've created believable effects which have made the audience become immersed into this make-believe world and sort of start to question their own ideology about what's going on and things like that, and sort of have their own interpretation on the film, depending on how they see it and whereabouts they will fall inside of the Marxist superstructure, whether they are the ruling force or whether they are working class, because their ideologies are both going to be different, so they're both going to have a different way of interpreting my film, and that's what I set out to do. So I'm quite happy with the result of my film. My effects, I think, look realistic enough. I mean, if I had more time to do it, I could easily improve the effects in all respects of the ways. Add different shots to sort of show the effects in action, and I kind of wish that I had more time to be able to experiment with more of the effects. I mean, 5 minutes is long, but for a film which relies heavily on visual effects, I don't think it's long enough. I think maybe something that lies around the 10-minute mark might have been a better sort of outcome for my film, so I could actually look into these effects and explore them as much as I possibly can to create the best possible film I can in the most immersive experience, which is what I wanted to do, which I did complete. It's just I would have liked to done a lot more with it. If I could do it all again, I think what I'd do is I'd work on the narrative of the film, just so the visual effects fall into place more and I can use them on more shots of the film, so I can actually get my creative investigation point across more clear than what I have done. Although I have got it across clear, it's just I realised that in post-production I could have got a lot more shots and then created a lot more visual effects based on them shots to go with the storyline which I had in mind. But other than that, I think my film is effective in doing what it set out to do, which is all I wanted from this course.